Did Israel force Arabs to flee their lands and property in 1948? Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries.
Welcome again, friends. This is Dane Rome, your announcer for today's Last Days Beacon program. Thank you for listening, and thanks for joining us. Just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with biblical prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You will find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thank you for your prayers and support for this ongoing faith ministry. On today's program, Dr. Schnitker interviews Carol Rushton regarding her brand new book entitled Understanding Israel and the Middle East. This book is subtitled Myths, Misconception, and the Truth About Israel and Her Neighbors. In this 25-chapter book, Carol deals with many of the lies and anti-Israel propaganda that we hear so often in the Western media. Carol lived in Israel for 8 years while working for the Jerusalem Post. She also studied the Middle East and Bible prophecy for most of her life. All of this knowledge and experience is included in this very timely book released on the 70th anniversary of the modern state of Israel. So let's join Dr. Schnitker and Carol Rushton for today's informative message.
Thank you, Dane. Welcome, friends. This is an exciting time at Southwest Prophecy Ministries. We have just published our third book entitled Understanding Israel and the Middle East. This book is subtitled Myths, Misconceptions, and the Truth About Israel and Her Neighbors. This book has 25 chapters and is 175 pages long. And what an appropriate time to be publishing a book such as this, as we are celebrating Israel's 70th birthday as a modern nation. Never before in human history has a dispersed people group been regathered from around the world and reestablished in their ancient homeland, all in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And of course, this regathering has taken place a miraculous almost 2,000 years after the diaspora of Israel in AD 70. It's a modern miracle, all in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And what a privilege to have in studio today the author of the book, Carol Rushton. Carol, it's great to have you back in studio today.
It is really great to be back. I am thrilled to be here.
Well, today will be part 3 of our series of discussions on your new book. And for those who've tuned into our previous broadcasts, you'll recall that the format of the book is really to address charges that have been leveled against Israel by its enemies and the Western press, and that we want to deal with these charges factually, and so we'll continue along that theme today. And the first question I'd like to ask, Carol, is that the Arabs charge that Israel forced the Arabs, the residents of what is now known as Israel, forced the Arabs to flee their lands and their property during the 1948 War of Independence. Is this true?
Well, that's a pretty easy question to answer, and of course we have historical facts at our command. Before the 1940s, and when Israel had started to come back to the land, when Jews had started coming back to land, before and after the Balfour Declaration, the Arabs were quite clear that they weren't exactly going to be welcoming to the Jews who were trying to return to their ancient homelands. Now, some of the Arabs were fine with this, but there were some Arabs that really did not want this to happen, and they really did a very good job of stirring up the Arab populations in what we now know as the modern state of Israel. So there were lots of riots, lots of massacres of Jews, constant agitation between the Jews and the Arabs or Muslims in the now modern state of Israel. So after World War II, and of course the world was very sympathetic to Jews returning to their ancient homelands after, of course, they found out about the Holocaust under Hitler and the Nazis. The UN, again, the Arabs were not real happy with this, so the UN came up in 1947 with a partition plan. Now, again, Jews were not real crazy about this partition plan because they were not going to get as much as what they wanted. The Arabs did not like it at all. The Jews finally decided, well, this is better than nothing. So we're not going to get everything that we want, but at least we'll have something. So they accepted the UN partition plan, and the UN voted on this partition plan in November 1947. Well, the Arabs rejected it outright. So there were skirmishes and some battles going on even before Israel declared itself a state on May 14, 1948. Now, what the Arabs had told, Arab countries had told the Arabs in Israel was that, hey, you don't have to worry about this little fledgling Jewish state. We're going to take care of them in about 3 days. We'll wipe them out. You leave so you won't be in the crossfire, and you'll get to return to your homes. And it'll be a week at most. Don't worry about taking anything. Everything will be fine. Everything will be intact. We just don't want you to get injured or fired upon or wounded in the resulting quick little war that we're going to engage with Israel. So the Arabs, a lot of the Arabs did leave, and this was not what the Jews wanted. Now, I will have a couple of quotes from some of the Arabs who actually admitted that they told the Israeli Arabs to leave. Jamal Husseini, spokesman for the Arab Higher Committee, promised that Arabs would defend the soil of our beloved country with the last drop of our blood. He also said that the Arabs would fight for every inch of their country. And then Jamal Husseini made the following statement to the UN Security Council on April 16, 1948. And again, this was before Israel declared itself a state on May 14th. The representative of the Jewish Agency told us yesterday that they were not the attackers, that the Arabs had begun the fighting. We did not deny this. We told the whole world that we were going to fight. So they had already made up their minds that they were going to fight as hard as they could to get the Jews. They were going to kill as many Jews as they could, and the rest of the Jewish population, they didn't think that that'd be a problem, or they would force them to flee. So, and this is backed up by the mayor of Jordanian-ruled East Jerusalem, and his name was Aref El-Araf. And in the 1950s, he wrote a book called The Catastrophe. In Arabic, that is called the Nakhba, the catastrophe. And Aref Al-Araf writes, the Arabs thought they would win in less than the twinkling of an eye, and that it would take no more than a day or two from the time the Arab armies crossed the border until all the colonies were conquered, and the enemy would throw down his arms and cast himself on their mercy. Now, what was the response of the Jews to all of this? They repeatedly urged the Arabs to stay. They wanted the Arabs to stay and help the Jews build the country of Israel. And they felt that the Arabs and Jews working together could make Israel a great, wonderful country. So the Assembly of Palestine Jewry had a broadcast on October the 2nd, 1947. Now again, this is right before the UN vote on the partition plan. This is what they were already saying. We will do everything in our power to maintain peace and establish a cooperation gainful to both Jews and Arabs. It is now, here and now, from Jerusalem itself, that a call must go out to the Arab nations to join forces with Jewry and the destined Jewish state and work shoulder to shoulder for our common good, for the peace and progress of sovereign equals. Well, this really didn't happen too much. Even in the Arabs rejected that. And now, even when Israel declared itself a nation on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, who was going to be the prime minister of Israel at that time, he, in his proclamation and in his statement, he said the following: "In the midst of wanton aggression, we yet call upon the Arab inhabitants of the State of Israel to preserve the ways of peace and play their part in the development of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its bodies and institutions. We extend our hand in peace and neighborliness to all the neighboring states and their peoples and invite them to cooperate with the independent Jewish nation for the common good of all." Well, history records that didn't exactly happen. And it also records that the Arab plan to wipe out this new fledgling Jewish state didn't work out so very well. And so it's sad that they left, and many of the Arabs left. And most of it was due to the instigation of the Arab countries and their leaders surrounding Israel, that, hey, we're gonna wipe this thing out in a few days. You'll be able to return. Don't take anything. And it's really sad that even today, Israeli Arabs who used to live in Israel, who fled Israel, and are now living in refugee camps, they look back to that day and they said, well, they told us to leave and that it was just going to be a few days and then we were going to return. I'm still waiting for that day to come so that we can return to our homes. They told us that it would be okay, and that hasn't happened. So I'd like to make a few more quotes in here. I don't want to be too lengthy, but these are just a few more of the quotes that some of the Arab countries made in urging Israeli Arabs to leave Israel. The Iraqi Prime Minister Nuri Said boasted, "We will smash the country, Israel, without guns and obliterate every place the Jews seek shelter in. The Arabs should conduct their wives and children to safe areas until the fighting has died down." And I'll have another quote. Edward Atiyah, the secretary of the Arab League office in London, he wrote a book called The Arabs, and this is what he had to say about that time period in his book. "This wholesale exodus was due partly to the belief of the Arabs, encouraged by the boastings of an unrealistic Arab press and the irresponsible utterances of some of the Arab leaders, that it could be only a matter of weeks before the Jews were defeated by the armies of the Arab states, and the Palestinian Arabs enabled to re-enter and retake possession of their country." And I could go on and on. This particular chapter in this book has quote after quote after quote of Arab leaders from many countries in the Middle East, verifying and confirming that they are the ones who urge Israeli Arabs to leave and flee their land, their homes, and their property. So Israel is not responsible. They did try to encourage, even after the 1948-49 war, when they signed a temporary peace agreement or an armistice. Israel still wanted some of the Arabs to come back, But the Arab leaders told them, no, don't go back. We haven't given up. We're still going to defeat this Jewish nation, and we're going to wipe them off the face of the earth. Well, it's 70 years later, and Israel's still here.
And so you have the third or fourth generation of those who were promised by their Arab friends, so to speak, that their exodus from Israel would be short-lived. And now 3 or 4 generations later, we still have Arabs living in these wretched refugee camps, ghettos, based upon the false promises that were made by the Arab neighbors. It's interesting that the propaganda here is exactly opposite of the truth, which propaganda often is. Well, along with that theme, Carol, Arabs demand that the Arab refugees from the 1948 war and their descendants be allowed to return to their former properties. And the claim is that this is something that Israel has always refused to do. In other words, these refugee camps only exist because of the intransigence of the Israeli government, that they are holding them hostage in these wretched camps, which is, of course, being portrayed as very unfair. Now, why would Israel refuse to allow these refugees to return to their rightful home and properties?
Well, again, we have historical facts that document why Israel cannot, at this point, allow these Arabs and their descendants to return. At the time of 1948, when Israel declared itself a state, there were over 800,000 Arabs living in what we now know as Israel. Around 650,000 left. Now, that's a lot of people. And Israel moved on. The Arabs in the Arab countries didn't move on, but Israel moved on because they had a country to take care of. They had a country to build. They had a state. They had citizens. They had Jews to welcome in. And Israel is the only Jewish country in the entire world. It's the only refuge that Jews have where they know they can come and be safe. They don't have to worry about their houses being burned down. They don't have to worry about persecution. They don't have to worry about the fact that a Jewish star, they're going to have to wear a Jewish star on the outside of their clothing to identify them as Jews. They don't have to worry that they're going to be thrown into concentration camps and be told that they have to take a shower. Israel's the last and best refuge for Jews all around the country who face persecution. So Israel, at this point, has absorbed and welcomed millions of Jews at this point. And Israel's not a big country, as we've already established before in a
it's
previous
the New Jersey Empire, right?
Yeah. It's a little, just about the size of New Jersey. So Israel's very tiny. There's only so much space. There's only so much room. And by this time, you have about, counting their descendants, after all of these years, you have about 5 million Arabs that would want to come back and live in Israel. This would overwhelm the state of Israel. There's no way that they could absorb that many people. I don't care whether it's Jews or Arabs, all at once. And to try to force Israel to accept all of these Arabs, it would immediately overturn the character of the Jewish state. And the Arabs admit this. And in that particular chapter in the book, I have a quote that they admit, the Arab leaders admit, that one of their reasons for wanting Israel to accept the right of return is so they can overturn the character of the Jewish state and turn it from being a Jewish state to an Arab or Muslim state overnight. And Israel cannot allow that to happen, for one. And then you also have the fact that again, Israel's moved on. How are they going to try to find out where these Arabs actually lived. I mean, the land has already been redeveloped. It would be impossible to try at this point. The land has changed so much. The country has changed so much. There's no way that they could pay enough for even the reparations to these Israeli Arabs and their descendants. How much would be enough? How much would Israel have to pay? So you have an untenable situation. There's just no way that Israel could absorb all of these 5 million Arabs. There's no way Israel could absorb that many Arabs back into their country and it not change the character of the country. Now, I do want to point out that when Jews are kicked out of a country, they have to leave usually with just what they can take with them. They're usually not allowed to take any money, just the clothes that they have on their backs, maybe a few suitcases. They're not allowed to sell their property. They come, a lot of them come very poorly situated, is about the best way I can put it. When I was in Israel in the 1990s, Israel had to send a couple of airplanes a couple of times into Yemen because the Yemen government decided they didn't want the Jews in their country. And so there were a couple of airlifts in the 1990s, and Israel did the best that they could, and they absorbed them, and they have an absorption process.
I remember the Ethiopian Jews were kicked out, as I recall, in the early 90s as well, and I believe the president of Ethiopia gave Israel a 72-hour deadline to transport, I think there was something on the order of 20,000 Ethiopian Jews, and they would all be killed unless Israel was able to extract them within a 72-hour period. And I'm sure these Ethiopian Jews came out with nothing but the clothes on their back.
Oh, yeah. And I remember that. I think that was right before I actually arrived in Israel. And the Israeli government and the Israeli military, they do a great job. I have to admit, they do a great job. If Jews are in peril in a country and they're going to be kicked out, the Israeli government kicks into high gear. They get the Israeli military out there. They get the planes out there. And they're not going to leave one Jew behind. They're going to get every Jew out. And I can tell you right now that the Ethiopian Jews, they've been pretty well absorbed into the country. And this is not just for the Ethiopian Jews or the Jews from Yemen or the Jews from any other country. We're talking. I saw this also with Jews from the United States of America, France, Spain, India, Great Britain. The Israeli government pays their expenses for a certain amount of time. They're allowed to, they're encouraged to take Hebrew classes. Number one, so they can learn the language and become absorbed into the country. Number two, it helps your employment prospects. If you can know the language, you're able to get a better job if you know the language and you know what's going on in the country. And now I had to pay for my Hebrew classes. The Jewish citizens or soon-to-be citizens, they didn't have to pay much, if anything at all. So the Israeli government works to find them jobs. They do try to do a pretty good job of accepting Jews from other countries into Israel because they want their country to work. Now, in defense of these refugees, and I really didn't know some of this until I started doing research for this particular chapter, except for Jordan, most of the Arab countries do not accept these Israeli Arab refugees. They don't allow them to have citizenship, which makes it real hard for them to get a job. Now, and a lot of them are they spend their entire lives in these refugees camps, and you look at the pictures, these camps look like ghettos out of the early 1900s, and the poverty is staggering. And how are people supposed to move on with their lives when the country in which they live won't accept them, won't allow them to have citizenship? Their education prospects are poor. Their employment prospects are poor, and it really is striking to me that there are a lot of very wealthy Arabs in some of these countries, and even in the Gaza Strip, the Judea and Samaria, or what is called as the West Bank. And there you can find mansions, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mansions. Some Arabs have done very well for themselves, but are they helping their Arab brethren who are stuck in these refugee camps? Not on your life. They're not helping them at all. They don't contribute one dime to help these their Israeli brethren who are stuck in these camps. I think another reason why the Arab governments, for the most part, do not absorb and accept these refugees is because the terrorist groups like Hamas, the PLO, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, ISIS, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, they use these refugees camps as recruiting grounds. They feed on that. They manipulate these refugees. Well, this is all Israel's fault. If it wasn't for Israel, you'd have a great life. If it wasn't for Israel, you'd still be in your homes. If it wasn't for Israel, you'd have a great job, and you'd be wealthy, and you wouldn't be in the poverty-stricken circumstances that you're in.
Don't they also offer financial incentives for these impoverished people to become terrorists?
Oh, sure.
And if they die, I think they put their families on some kind of a pension program.
Yeah, it depends upon if you're injured, the family gets so much. If you're commit a terrorist attack and you don't die and you're arrested by Israel and you're put in prison, then the family gets so much. If you actually die in the process of committing your terrorist attacks, the family gets more. So, and plus, these terrorist groups are pretty clever. I couldn't believe it when I went over there to Israel. Hamas actually offers health insurance. It's like Blue Cross Blue Shield for terrorists. I'm not kidding.
Arafat care.
I'm not kidding. And it just stunned me because they offer medical insurance, they offer this, they offer that, they offer a pension plan.
And all they have to do is kill Jews.
Yes, you sign up to be a terrorist, and you commit to doing your part in killing as many Jews as possible. Hey, you're gonna be okay. And I think that as far as wrapping up this, I'd like to again give a few quotes. Egypt's foreign minister, or used to be foreign minister. This was all the way back in the 1940s. His name was Mohammed Salah ad-Din. And he had a quote from that was reported on in the Al-Masri newspaper on October 11, 1949. And this is what Egypt's former foreign minister had to say. It is well known and understood that the Arabs, in demanding the return of the refugees to Palestine, mean their return as masters of the homeland and not as slaves. With a greater clarity, they mean the liquidation of the state of Israel. So, and then I'd like to give a few more quotes here. At a 1957 refugee conference, as reported by the newspaper Beirut Al-Masa on July 15, 1957, they had a quote. They reported on a resolution that Syria had passed, and this is what the resolution says in part. Any discussion aimed at a solution of the Palestine problem, which will not be based on ensuring the refugees' right to annihilate Israel, will be regarded as a desecration of the Arab people and an act of treason. Now, lest you think that I'm being unfair here in saying, well, the Arabs, they really don't want to accept these Arab countries. They don't want to accept these refugees. They don't want to absorb them. They don't want to make them citizens. They don't want to really care for them. This is an outsider who observed what was going on. Sir Alexander Galloway, and he was an official who worked for the UN Relief and Works Agency, supposedly getting money from the other countries to help these refugees in these other countries. And he gave a rather blunt assessment of how of the Arabs' treatment of these refugees in these refugee camps. I'm going to have a paraphrase at the end because he has a word in there that I don't really want to repeat. So, as I quote this, you'll understand why. He said, Sir Alexander Galloway said this in 1952. The Arab states do not want to solve the refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore, as an affront to the United Nations, and as a weapon against Israel. Arab leaders don't care whether the refugees live or die. And I used the Jewish Virtual Library was a great resource in the research that I did for this book, and they make a really great point. Had the Arabs accepted the 1947 UN resolution of a partition plan with a Jewish state,
a two-state solution,
the two-state solution, a Jewish state and an Arab state. If had the Arabs accepted the 1947 UN resolution, not a single Palestinian would have become a refugee, and an independent Arab state would now exist beside Israel.
Wow. Well, this has been very enlightening. I think it gives a different cast to this whole refugee situation. Very different than what is being reported, certainly in Arab countries and in the Western press. And facts are stubborn things, and we have been dealing with facts today as it relates to the Arab refugee situation. Well, that's all the time we have for today, friends. Thank you for joining us. Please join us next week as we continue to talk with Carol about her brand new book, Understanding Israel and the Middle East. And now our announcer, Dane Rome, will share how you may obtain a copy of this informative new book.
Thank you, Dr. Schnitker. Today, we're offering the latest book published by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. The book is entitled Understanding Israel and the Middle East by Carol Rushton. The concluding chapter of the book is written by Dr. Schnitker and deals with God's peace plan for the Middle East. This professionally published book has 25 chapters and is 175 pages in length. You may obtain a copy of the Understanding Israel and Middle East for a gift of $9.99 plus $2 for shipping and handling. To obtain your copy, go to our website, www.swpm.us. Go to our bookstore and type in Understanding Israel and the Middle East. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Well, friends, please join us again for next week's Last Days Beacon program brought to you by Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Until then, this is your announcer, Dane Rome, saying thanks for listening.